All right, good morning. It is 9 a.m. and we will call the meeting to order. Paula, would you mind doing the roll call, please?
Brent Wall.
Here.
Jonathan Dotson.
Present.
Kasha Egan.
Here.
Ophelia Cancio.
Here.
Richard McCown. Here. Ava Scaramucci.
Here.
And Sandino Thompson. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. It has been a little while since we've met. There's been a tremendous amount of change in Bricktown, which is kind of par for the course for the city. We have a streetcar, we have a new mayor, we have 3 new council persons coming in. We also have a new member today. We have Ophelia with us. Welcome. We appreciate you being here and your time and service to the city. So we will get the meeting going. We need to approve the minutes, item number 2. Do we have a call for approval?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes are approved. Item 3, we had no cases withdrawn this period, no continuance request, no items on the consent docket, and no items for individual consideration. Items number 7 on other business A, we would like to recognize the service of Omar Corey to the committee, and Lisa was going to read a little bit for us.
Yes, I'll read the resolution. And I'm sorry, I had reached out to Omar to see if he could be here, and I hope he doesn't come in 2 minutes too late. A resolution of the Bricktown Urban Design Committee of the City of Oklahoma City acknowledging Omar Corey for his valuable service and dedication to the Bricktown Urban Design Committee. Whereas Omar Corey has faithfully devoted his time and expertise to serve the citizens of Oklahoma City as a Bricktown Urban Design Committee member from July 2014 to January 2019, and whereas Omar Corey has routinely contributed to the committee through his skill as an architect with specific knowledge in historic preservation, and whereas Omar Corey has demonstrated uncommon dedication to the committee through his methodical attention to detail and earnest regard for the applicable standards and guidelines in the consideration of projects presented to the committee, and whereas Omar Corey's sincerity, collaborative spirit, and compassionate nature have served the community well in resolving conflicts and offering sound technical and creative advice to applicants, and whereas the fulfillment of Omar Corey's responsibilities on the committee was achieved with a steadfast devotion to the well-being of the community and the overall betterment of the Bricktown Urban Design District. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Bricktown Urban Design Committee hereby respectfully commends Omar Corey for his outstanding years of service to the Bricktown Urban Design Committee of the City of Oklahoma City, adopted by the Bricktown Urban Design Committee of the City of Oklahoma City on this 13th day of February, 2019. You need it.
Thank you, Lisa. Welcome, Sandino. Thank you. I need a motion to adopt the resolution. A second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. The motion is adopted, and we certainly appreciate Mr. Corey's diligence and hard work on the committee. Item B under other business is SPUD 01086 at 222 East Sheridan Avenue, Suite 2. This item has been kind of batted around a little bit. It was here. We pushed it, and then we've been waiting for it to come back. So would the applicants like to say a few words today?
Yeah, Michael can introduce
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you.
Yes, this application is for a Simplified Plan Unit Development, also known as a SPUD. The focus of the SPUD at the location 222 East Sheridan Avenue is to allow for a 360 square foot level 2 EMD sign on the west elevation of the building that would provide advertising space for the parking structure itself, as well as advertising for the businesses that are located within the parking structure, and also to provide advertising space for local and Bricktown events. This item was on your agenda at the October 10th meeting. At that time, the applicant requested a continuance, and it was slated, I think, for a couple of other meetings where it was, again, requested for continuance, and we finally brought it back to you today at the meeting on February 13th. The report has not changed much from what it was in October. Staff has recommended denial of the project on the basis that it does not meet the standards and regulations of the BC Core Development District. The proposed EMD sign is 22.5 times larger than the maximum size of the sign allowed for this type of sign on this building for this use. The proposed SPUD also includes the use of EMD sign to advertise other businesses that occupy space within the parking garage. There is no specified maximum size for an EMD sign for these other uses because the sign code presently does not permit these uses to have EMD signs at all. When the sign code for Bricktown was revised in 2016, one of the issues emphasized in the ordinance amendment was EMD signs. This was done in response to some EMD signs that had been approved prior to that time through another SPUD application. These new EMD sign regulations were tailored specifically to Bricktown and focused on two key issues. One, limiting the use of EMD signs to only certain uses, and two, limiting the size of these signs to a size commensurate with their needs. Based on the prior SPUD approval for the EMD signs at other parking lots, the 16 square foot standard was determined to be an appropriate maximum size for parking lot needs. Based on the operational function of such EMD signs for a parking lot, such as displaying the parking rates, indicating whether the parking lot is open or not, and indicating whether or not the lot is full, it was determined that this sign size was sufficient for that purpose, regardless of whether it was for a surface parking lot or a parking structure, and irrespective of the size of the parking facility or the number of stalls available. The objective behind this focus was to prevent the proliferation of EMD signs and to assure that when EMD signs were allowed, that their size was appropriate to the specific use, and the signs would be at the time, the consensus was the EMD signs have a generally detrimental impact to the aesthetic of the district and are inconsistent with the character of the 100-plus-year-old brick warehouse district that prides itself on the appeal of that aesthetic. This aesthetic is critical to the success of the district, and maintaining a certain measure of decorum is essential to that characteristic of the district. Secondarily, the proposed SPUD also allows for advertising of uses that are not currently allowed to have EMD signs under the current rules that were changed in 2016. And so for that reason, we have many reservations about opening that floodgate to other uses, and this being a precedent to allow other similar types of uses in the Bricktown district to also start using EMD signage. And then thirdly, there are provisions in the SPUD regulations that state that PUD and SPUD are design and planning tools that are not to be used to circumvent policies or used in lieu of seeking a variance to the regulations. And we believe that this SPUD does exactly that, and therefore it's an improper use of the SPUD process to set new regulations for this property. So in our recommendation to you on this case, we've taken a kind of a belt and suspenders approach. The belt being a recommendation for denial of the SPUD. And secondarily, because we have seen other SPUDs approved against the recommendation of this committee, we feel it also appropriate and important to address the potential approval of this SPUD if it were approved at some point later down the line by the Planning Commission and then subsequently the City Council. Accordingly, because of our concern for that potential approval, we've set forth for you a second recommendation to pass on to the Planning Commission and City Council that if the SPUD were to be approved, that we feel that there are 4 very important restrictions that should be placed on this EMD sign if it were to be approved. And that's the suspenders, if you will. So in conclusion, again, the staff is recommending denial of the SPUD initially, and then subsequently also to recommend 4 restrictions that would apply to the signs should the SPUD be approved ultimately before City Council. So that concludes our presentation. We're prepared to respond to any questions that the committee may have.
I had a question. So your belt and suspenders approach, is that, I think, in your estimation or maybe in the staff's estimation, like the best way to sort of communicate the concerns or the issues? Because I think in the past when we've talked about these types of circumstances, I know this is a new instance, but I don't know if it all sort of trickled up. I mean, I think there's a lot of conversations that happen within the Bricktown community with property owners, stakeholders, things like that, and then obviously through this commission, this board. So is that suspenders approach sort of your thought based on your recommendation on how to sort of convey those messages as well? Because I do know in planning commission meetings, even at the city council level, sometimes those things might not be communicated.
And Sandino, you may remember that the last time there was a SPUD application, we had not yet developed in writing any guidelines, and so it was gray enough that it was hard to defend. I thought you did.
Michael, in the report, it describes the sign as static. Does that mean that it can display electronically, but it doesn't flash or have animation? Is that
Level 2 EMD sign does change messages at a specified rate.
okay?
But it's not like a live video TV type of feed.
Okay.
Well, so to expound upon that, though, are there examples in the area? So I'm familiar with, obviously, the ones that are on top of the parking, several parking areas in Bricktown, and then the ones that are at, I believe, Reno and Sheridan. So those also are, I think, level 2 EMD. So they don't show video necessarily, but
Right.
they essentially show essentially like a slideshow's worth of advertising.
That's correct.
Do we have any additional questions for Michael before we move on? Okay.
Good morning. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. Also with me is Tim Johnson. So before I get into some of the details, I do want to address one thing that staff said. To suggest that we should apply for a variance, unfortunately, state law would not allow that to happen. The use is not allowed, and state law is very clear that variances for use are simply prohibited. There was one exception that dealt with oil and gas, and in November of 2016, that was taken off the table. So the only way to accomplish this goal is through a rezoning application, through an SPUD. That is why we're here. In the staff report, it suggests that the application is improper. It actually doesn't suggest it, it flat out says that it's improper. I would submit that it's not only not improper, but it is the only proper means by which we can seek approval for the entitlements necessary to build this sign. I'm a bit offended that staff would suggest it's improper. The city certainly accepted our money when we filed the application. As far as I know, there are no deficiencies in the application, so to state that it's improper is just simply not accurate. I do want to ask staff, in the staff report, they state that there are many inaccuracies in the SPUD master design statement. I'd like staff to detail those for us.
I'll start with a few. On page 1, it's in the second paragraph. It's, in my opinion, there are a lot of statements that are opinion and not fact. For example, it says it does not fully address the use of EMD signs. It does. It sets the size. It sets what type are allowed. It doesn't address what you would like to propose, but that was an intentional development of the regulation. Then there's a sentence, it is silent on wall signs. Again, what is embedded in the design guidelines and regulations was intentionally set by the committee, planning commission, and the council in the ordinance that got approved. There's a sign. There are 2 very large EMD signs in this district which can be seen from Bricktown. I believe you're talking about the arena sign and the one on Gaylord. Yes, they can be seen, but they're not in the district, and they are permitted by different regulations. Then there's a sentence, since the city's sign code is, quote, somewhat ambivalent. I don't believe it's ambivalent. It sets limits, size.
Yeah, it also states that in the DBD district that signs are the size and height of similar signs are left up to the review committee on a case-by-case basis, and there are regs in the DBD for these signs. So that's an inaccurate statement. Also, on the very first line of the second paragraph, the word core is misspelled. It's a minor detail. And then later on, at the bottom of the paragraph, talks about an unlimited blade sign, which this Spud is not necessary to have. They could come in and get a blade sign. They could have come in October for that sign and had it approved without the Spud. So that's a summary of the inaccuracies we detailed back in October to Development Services to relate back to the applicant. And we haven't seen any revised version of this Spud in reaction to those comments.
So perhaps there's a misspelled word, but other than that, it's perhaps a difference of opinion rather than inaccuracies within the SPUD document. The other statement made in the staff report is that this is an attempt to circumvent the rules. Well, I guess in theory, then every single zoning case ever filed in this city, of which there are hundreds and hundreds every year, are intended to circumvent the current zoning on a site. So to suggest that there's some sort of underhanded or improper means that the applicant is seeking to do is just simply not accurate. They're going through the process that is outlined in the ordinances in Oklahoma City to seek approval of an SPUD. So when we get to the SPUD, this is not dissimilar to the SPUD that Mr. Johnson and myself did on behalf of the brewers for the parking structures. At the time, there was a lot of pushback on those too, and one of our arguments was, when we think of Bricktown and what it is, it's the entertainment district in our city. And so if not here, where? I mean, if not here in the entertainment district, where would EMD signs be appropriate? We certainly have deemed them appropriate as a city in other districts. The city itself enjoys the use of EMD signs. If we looked out the window right there, we'd see 2 of them on the Civic Center Park. We'd see one of the biggest ones, perhaps the biggest one, on the side of the Chesapeake Arena, which the city owns. The Oklahoman building has an EMD sign. So the downtown district, and specifically Bricktown, I think is proper to have EMD signs. One of the main reasons we believe it's proper is when you think of Bricktown, you think of the number of different events that are happening within the district. The only way to really properly advertise those is to have an EMD sign. If you think about the logistics of a static typical sign, you'd have to be changing that out all the time, and that wouldn't be effective. So to be able to have a sign like this in which you're able to promote the district and all the wonderful things that are happening, an EMD sign is the only way to do it. You will see in your staff report that there was an effort several years ago for a sign, I believe it was 540 square feet, that was denied. What we attempted to do here is to scale it down. I do believe that the 16 square feet that is shown in the code is wholly inadequate when you're dealing with a sizable structure like a parking garage. Perhaps it works for a single surface parking lot, but when you have a structure of this size, it's just simply inadequate. It's not dissimilar to the way that the sign code handles office zoning. When you look at the sign code as it relates to O2 office zoning, it's meant for a single-story standalone building. it is not uncommon for us to have to go get other approvals when you have large structures, because when you have large structures and multiple tenants, the sign code is wholly inadequate. So we believe what we have here is a application that is consistent with other applications that have been approved in recent time by the City Council. It's consistent with the general theme of the district, we believe, and it is in an effort to serve as a benefit to the district to be able to promote all of the different things that are happening. And as I mentioned, I don't see any other way to do that without an EMD sign. So we would ask for your approval, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
So I'm curious, because I think, as Avis had mentioned earlier, we actually had this conversation several years ago. I think the current sort of regulations and changes to the ordinances, code, and design regulations that have been mentioned by the staff report are indicative of that entire conversation, including the approvals. In fact, I mean, so I think it was. I think all of that's been acknowledged. I look at this conversation very similarly to some of the conversations we've had about other sort of evolving types and uses of building form, particularly in Bricktown, which is an entertainment district in a really sort of historic area of our city. So I'm very curious about where are the limits. So the Spud that's being produced, I mean, that's being proposed, sorry, deviates from the guidelines that have been put in place, specifically with the idea of creating restrictions and limitations in this historic preservation district for all the reasons that sort of we enjoy, I mean, from property owners to patrons to visitors from out of town, sort of come to enjoy Bricktown. So yes, it is an entertainment district. We've had these conversations about the difference between it and Chesapeake Arena or even the downtown area. It doesn't have the same regulations. So I'm curious, what are the limits? At what point do we just put billboards on any building, any structure in Bricktown that has sizable sort of spacing, et cetera? And at what point does it change the character of what exists when you think about the moniker of the name itself, Bricktown? I mean, we've had these conversations in regards to EFIS. We've had these conversations in regards to a lot of evolving thoughts. And I understand what may have happened in the past and how we might have gotten here. All those things kind of create a fabric and a historic sort of precedent that we look at. But at what point, what size? Like what makes this size better than the size that was proposed previously? What makes you not just use the entire sort of wall form? I mean, it would actually allow you to sort of have 3 or 4 different uses. Why not put a video screen up? And what are the limitations, sort of, if not the code regulations and the design guidelines?
I think the scale. I mean, I think you raise a great question, but I think the scale of it, and I think the scale of the proposed sign here is more in keeping with the overall size of the structure. The previous application was almost twice the size of this and was perhaps out of scale. So I think the limits are what is approvable and what is within scale.
Okay, so not the design guidelines or the regulations that have been put in place, with some level of public input, feedback, and essentially, you know, sort of democratic process for approvals through the City Council and the committee that they put in place. But actually, in fact, on an individual basis, just sort of a deliberation about the scale is sort of the real limitation that we see.
Well, I mean, that's the way that the process is set up, you know, in our city. There wouldn't be a need for me if the rules were just black and white and there wasn't, you know, any ability to deviate from them. In terms of stakeholder process, one of the things I think there's a little bit of frustration is Mr. Johnson, not only is he the engineer on this project, but he's also a significant stakeholder. He was never invited to a meeting to talk about signage. I'm not sure if his partners were either. And so I appreciate that there was discussion, but I'm not sure that there was perhaps discussion with all of the interested parties. And perhaps you can never get that. But the idea that, you know, the limited discussions that were had without maybe some key people that led to 16 square feet, and that's just the way it should be, I would disagree with that.
Fair enough.
With all due respect, this was discussed many times at such a setting as this, and of course, it's always made available to anybody that wants to come and participate. And how do we have a way of making people know of upcoming events?
Notice is never sent.
I'm not sure that's required. I'm asking, how do we do that?
Our public notice requirement for ordinance recommendations is to post it on the agenda, which is posted here. It's posted on the website. The Planning Commission and City Council hearing, or at least the City Council hearing, is published in the newspaper. So,
Okay. Because I regularly see people at these meetings if there's something they're interested
Planning
in.
Commission has 2 hearings and City Council has 3 hearings.
So that kind of actually brings me maybe back to a staff question that you may or may not know the answer to offhand, but do you recall what the feedback was as the revised, is ordinance or design regulation? I'm not sure I'm using the right
So ordinance amendment.
Okay, so as that revised ordinance was actually sort of promulgated through the city, do you recall the feedback or any sort of public comments or things of that nature? Or is maybe that too far in the past for us to...
I don't, if you're talking from the point it went to Planning Commission and to Council, I don't remember that there were any comments. Do you, Michael? I'm looking at Michael. I don't, but that was 3 years?
Yeah.
At least 3 years ago.
And maybe the applicant might actually have some insight on it too, because I'm actually quite responsive, because I feel like in the other side of that coin, when these things came up, the ordinance is actually created in part because of, I feel like what was a lot of feedback. I'm not suggesting it was all of the feedback, and I'm not even suggesting that maybe every voice was heard, because I don't know that that's always the case. But I know there was much public feedback. I know there were articles in the newspapers and things like that about this concern. And I'm a huge fan, given my own personal history with the city of Oklahoma City and with this community, of all sort of voices being able to have their say. So I think that's critically important. I'm a huge fan of businesses and property owners being able to sort of have their say and push back. So I do think it's important that if there were comments, I think those actually, and feedback that was given in regards to the ordinances, and there was some level of debate that took place as those things were being pushed. I think that matters a little bit in the context of this. As much as, maybe any of the other things being presented. So I feel like maybe that's not really a question, maybe sort of more of a point to the staff or even to the applicant to make. But I also don't recall where any of that pushback came in these very public sort of conversations that did take place.
Yeah, and I'm not, throwing stones at staff or the city. It's the way that the process is set up. But it's not uncommon that at the last minute, or perhaps never, the Airbnb is a good example. That thing went through all these committees, Planning Commission, and it wasn't until it was going to the City Council meeting that somebody woke up and, I guess, was bored enough to be watching Channel 20 and discovered that, oh my goodness, this is going. And then, out of nowhere, armies were formed to go fight this thing. Because there's no actual notice sent. And unless you're, a geek like me that just follows municipal government, you would never follow agendas, right? If you're the average citizen or the average property owner, unless you get something mailed to you notifying you of this, perhaps you're not just scrolling the city website or scrolling the journal record to see the, the legal notices that are published. And so it's an imperfect system. And so that's my only comment, is that, I understand there's much debate here because you people are all kind enough to volunteer your time to be invested in the city. But those that perhaps are busy doing other things and don't actually get a physical notice mailed to them had no idea that this was working its way through the system.
Well, I understand what Mr. Box is saying, but the ordinance that is on the books is the ordinance that was taken through committee, through Planning Commission, through City Council. It was noticed as required. And to suggest that it wasn't properly noticed, or somehow because people weren't paying attention makes it less valid, I completely disagree with.
No, I never said it wasn't properly noticed.
No, but
I said it was noticed pursuant to the way that it's set up, and that's fine, but it's an imperfect system.
But you're suggesting that it's not valid, that something about its validity is compromised.
Not at all.
Because nobody came to protest.
The comment was raised that it was vetted and it was discussed, and my only point was there are significant stakeholders that weren't aware and didn't get the opportunity, but it doesn't make it any less valid. The ordinance is 100% valid.
Maybe, just stepping back, I think probably what you're experiencing is something that we've talked about as we've jumped on this council or the board, is to kind of help with the evolution of Bricktown from being just an entertainment district, to which it's historically been, to a place that people would live and work. And so I think that is a big component of us saying not only is there an ordinance in place, but our reticence to make changes outside of that is to say we actually don't want this to just be an entertainment district. Sure. We think it has the capacity to be a whole lot more. And large EMD signs aren't necessarily a part of that. I think especially this far outside of the ordinance as we would see it. The second thing is to say that the EMD sign is not the only way in which we get to notify people of what's going on. As someone who has a venue, social media is much more important than just the sign we have. And so I'm not excusing that we don't need EMD signs in various places in our city, but to say that that's the only way in which we can notify people of the events that are occurring, I don't think is completely accurate.
No, and I don't disagree, but there are people that are strange, like me, who have, no social media whatsoever, and there are people like, my father's generation who can't even operate a cell phone properly. So the idea that they would be able to be notified via social media is just simply, not going to happen for everybody. But I appreciate your point.
I kind of want to step back a little bit too, and I haven't drilled into the SPUD, but can you give us just a quick thumbnail sketch of why this sign is needed in the first place?
Yeah, so our client has a unique structure that has the opportunity to have multiple different businesses, and the concern is how does he properly sign that, and this was the path that he believed to be the best to do that.
So is the garage not full? Are they trying to drive more cars into the garage? Is that a purpose here?
I think it's a couple of things. It's that, it's the ability to, like I said, properly sign tenants he may have in the building, and then also to promote other things happening within the district.
And so those promotions would be paid advertisement revenue that the property owner would get?
Yes.
Okay. And I think Jonathan's kind of hinting at some other things too. Is we're trying to create this really street level pedestrian culture in the city, and having these really large lit up signs up high, really detract from that. So if you have tenants on the ground floor, they have plenty of opportunity for signage at that level. If the parking garage is full and you're not having any issues getting cars in there to park, then the sign kind of seems unnecessary in a lot of ways. I also do worry that other parking vendors are it's going to be sort of a war of attrition. All of a sudden it's going to be, they have this big sign, I have my little sign down here, I need a bigger sign, and I feel like we're going to kind of get into an arms race a little bit on how big these signs get.
Now, fair point. I will say that, each zoning case stands on its own merits. There's no, because this were to get approved, the next guy doesn't get to point to this and say, you can't deny us. If that were the case, I'd just be pointing to what we did for the Brewers and saying, you can't deny us. Each has to stand on their own merits. Each case is unique, and, the facts that relate to it are unique to this building.
Do we have any other comments from the committee?
I have, I think, a little bit of a clarification in regards to what city staff is proposing. So you all had proposed two elements. I think one was a recommendation to deny this application, and then also a recommendation, I guess this, and I guess I can just read the language, but would you kind of reiterate what it is you're recommending, Michael, because I think you put it better than I did.
You want me to go through the four?
Yeah, just the actions that you're recommending that we take.
We have two separate recommendations for the committee to consider. The first being recommendation to deny all the Spud. And we've taken the unusual step of adding a second recommendation based on our past experience with previous recommendations for denials of SPUDs, that in case this were to be approved by the Planning Commission and or the City Council going forward, that we wanted to have it on record that if it were to be approved, that we feel that there are 4 very critical restrictions we feel should be placed on any such approval of that SPUD for the reasons we've outlined in the staff report. So.
Okay.
Sandino, that's on page 8.
I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this, so is there anyone on here that is inclined to vote in favor of what's happening? Can you talk about, if you do, what your thought process is to kind of maybe nuance some of the discussion that's occurred? Am I allowed to ask that? Okay.
I would agree with that because we cannot talk outside of these chambers, and we never have a chance to talk inside the chambers. And I think we talked about this back in October or something. So if it's agreeable and permissible, it would be nice that we just have a little open conversation about this. I would think that would be nice.
Being that I wasn't involved where all these EMDs started and coming in, that this is the first time I'm coming across this problem, I don't want heat either way because I don't like stress like that. But my question is to understand also a lot of the backlash, and I see why in the considerations, why we don't necessarily want the sign manufacturer having unlimited access to advertising for more signs in Bricktown. I did do a drive-by this morning to kind of look at it personally, physically, avoiding the streetcar, turned the corner there. And I hope this doesn't offend the presenters here, but I wouldn't say this is particularly aesthetically pleasing of a building in general, and the facade is really looking a little worn. I see what looks like water damage or water is holding at the joints, at the floor levels from what I saw. So I kind of see this as an opportunity rather than putting ivy all over something, because that's an architect's approach to fixing a building's facade. Maybe a sign could help distract. There would be concern for light pollution with how bright it would be, but we're also next to a ballpark. So I also see how I'm not sure that that's, I appreciate the point, and I agree that the entertainment district can be more than an entertainment district, but I also have my own concerns as part of this committee of how much action is happening in Bricktown currently and how many vacancies I see. So I also want to look at the opportunity of working with the professionals that we have there, but I also understand that we need to take into consideration conversations that have happened with the Bricktown Owners Association, or Business Owners Association. But so that's where I'm kind of on the fence with this, because I would see proportionally, to my eye, a 16 square foot sign would look pretty small for the size of the building that we have now here currently. And I'm personally, hey, can we add the consideration, clean up your facade because it's looking a little worn, but that's another statement for another day. So that's where I'm kind of coming from right now. And has any of this been breached with any of the other business owners in Bricktown of how offensive or attractive this is? So it was a very long-winded.
So I think I can, as somebody who has been on the Bricktown board, as well as having a business in Bricktown, and being a part of this committee, I can speak to a couple of those, I think, things that you've raised. So I'll start with the last one first, is that the ordinance, at least to my understanding, the ordinance that is now in place is in reaction to the fact that previous ordinances were not strong enough, not viewed as strong or clear enough to really sort of give some guidance for for EMD signs, and really it was the thing that kind of got caught up was the evolving nature and use of those EMD signs, because I also believe, and staff can correct me where I might be wrong, that there are approved uses of EMD signs. There is very limited and specific in nature, and those are, and it's on purpose. There are limited uses of other types of signs in Bricktown as well. There are times when we have done variances given specific instances, but it's all typically in relation to the role of this committee, this urban design committee, to really be sort of the, as I understand it at least, these are my words, but to help to interpret and guide the ordinances and the design guidelines that have been put in place to maintain sort of the historic character and to guide that historic character moving forward. So there has been conversation. There was ample conversation at the Bricktown Association meetings, things of that nature. What I will also say that others may not want to say is that there, and it speaks to, I think, maybe one of your first points about the sort of waning sort of nature. I mean, the reports of the demise or the low points or high points of Bricktown in general. Most of the property owners, at least in my experience, are very collegial. So these aren't issues that any of them are interested in being on the record as saying they approve or they disapprove, because they also own property. I mean, and I accept that and understand that. Fortunately, I'm not a property owner. I'm just a business operator here. So I don't have that sort of restriction or that concern in regard to my neighbors. So the Bricktown Association typically will not say we approve or we disapprove of an EMD use or whatever the case is, because you have, because they're really interested in sort of trying to push the commercial viability, things like that, of Bricktown forward in as much consistency as possible. So I'm going to say that that's my personal opinion and commentary. Others may disagree. So that's in regards to two of those statements. But the other thing that I think is important to mention is the impact of Spuds in a historic district, right? So we have these historic districts. We have these form codes designed for some level of preservation, right? And so, after urban renewal or whatever the case is, it came in and demolished a bunch of stuff. People come back and say, well, maybe we shouldn't do that again. So now we're going to sort of make a change, or we're going to try and address some of those issues. Well, then we find out, well, there's still a way that, if somebody wants to buy a historic structure and just tear it down, there's not to, so maybe we want to do something about it. So what I understand in regards to EMDs is that's what's taken place, and that's why you have the ordinance that you have, which is in itself pretty clear and straightforward. So to deviate or do something different to that is really to say, it's really a variance or whatever the case might be. So those are the pieces of commentary I can give you, because I was here for that conversation. I have talked to merchants, property owners, and things of that nature, and I'm not at all going to suggest that all are supportive or dismissive. I think several people have a similar opinion and viewpoint as you do, and then I think several people have expressed opinions maybe similar to Jonathan or maybe even myself as well.
Okay, I might as well chime in here. I have this crazy vision. Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
It's about time.
Oh.
I was waiting.
Sorry. I have this crazy vision to build a parking garage on Reno, basically between the canal and the plow building, be about roughly 300 feet long, maybe 250. And the vision that I've had was to do a giant EMD sign, the full length of it, that's 50 feet tall, so that when you're driving in, no, I'm not kidding, you drive in on Oklahoma Avenue, you exit the boulevard, and you come into Bricktown, and you're greeted by this giant movie screen, outdoor movie screen. And the precedent for it is at WinStar Casino. It's $1 million, daytime EMD sign that you see down there. We drive by in the day, and it's made in Germany. I've driven up close to it, admired all the other, ridiculous stuff glommed onto that giant tent. So I've had this vision. Well, okay, so the Urban Land Institute, it has a really amazing chapter here in Oklahoma. And we've got a book club, right? And we just finished reading Walkable City Rules by Jeff Speck. Now, my vision for this was based on, I love going to New York City, kind of have a love-hate relationship with Times Square, but I'm like standing around staring at that just like, this is so cool. Because you're just, inundated with, how our brains have been trained to just constant visual candy changing nonstop, et cetera. There are 18 million people that live in the New York City metro. I think we're not quite that big a population yet. And I think it's going to be a really, really long time before we can even apply those kind of unique outlier standards of cities, mega cities like New York or Tokyo or wherever. And those are unique entertainment district things. The theater district in Cleveland, which is the third largest theater district in the United States, doesn't look anything like Times Square. It looks more like Bricktown. There's no big EMD signs. It's very calm and understated and, low key. So looking at walkable city rules, I'm thinking my vision's all wrong for Bricktown, that it's not a pedestrian-friendly kind of thing. If we were to do this giant 50-foot tall, 250-foot wide movie screen, that it would probably prevent hotels and or residential buildings getting built across the street, which I think is an appropriate use for all of that land that is currently serving the Harkins Theater parking, et cetera. And we've seen proposals before, I don't know that they've made it all the way to this committee, for a hotel-type structure on this corner. So that's yet another question. If you've got a big EMD sign here on a property line, that just seems like a strange place to locate it, given that we really ought to build buildings property line to property line. But if you build a hotel, you need the windows, so you pull it back. But then there's this giant EMD sign coming right through the blackout curtains. So I don't know. I feel like we definitely need to look at the history of I wasn't part of the discussion to get, the historic flavor of this. That's before I was on this committee. Because I'm more like, hey, big signs everywhere, let's make it more like Las Vegas. But then again, Las Vegas is one of the most unwalkable cities in the country. It's all designed to push you into the casinos because that's where they make their money. So I think we need to be really careful about what we do with Bricktown. I'm all for making it more entertaining. I'm not a big into fake old. I'm never going to be into fake old. But so there might be like some updating or modern or like recasting a vision, a shared vision that might not allow this sign, but it might allow like a more fun signs, if you will. But I don't think my movie screen idea, and that was my initial thoughts on this, was like make it bigger so it goes from wall to wall 135 feet, but I don't think that's the right thing to do for Bricktown, for a walkable district. And I think Bricktown may be the most walkable place we have in the city right now.
I'm going to make a couple of points in response to some of the statements the applicant made. This sign could be, if it was restricted to parking lot advertising only, could be reprocessed through a variance request, just by size. The maximum size for a parking lot sign is 16 square feet. If they restricted the signage on the EMD to just the parking lot, they could request a larger sign than 16, whether it be 360 or 250 or whatever it might be, through a simple variance. The fact that they're asking for advertising on this sign for other businesses that are in the parking structure is a little bit of a quandary for us, in that those businesses that are in the base of that parking structure already have signage facing Sheridan Avenue. So to suggest that those businesses need additional signage or more signage than other businesses in Bricktown are allowed to have is another concern that we would have with respect to this request. So basically, for all the reasons we've identified in the staff report, plus these other concerns that are being raised, we reiterate our recommendation for denial.
I would also like to follow up with someone that said this earlier. Being a property owner in Bricktown, as well as being a merchant in Bricktown, I have gone through a long, lengthy process to get a sign, just a regular sign announcing my business. It's not easy to get a regular sign. We do not pick on EMD signs. We now have something in place that we finally have written guidelines for it, and before we really did not. We had implications, but nothing on paper. Back when we worked on all of this, and there was, I don't know who around this horseshoe was involved back then, other than Sandino, and is that all? And myself. There was lengthy discussions about it, not only in the urban design meetings, but also in the Bricktown Association board meetings. There's also been lengthy discussions about regular signage in those meetings. So I would not want the applicant to think, or the people representing him to think, that we are picking on a particular signage. Because that's not the case. Our responsibility is to, as to the best of our ability, to follow what has been put in place. And there's been a lot of people and a lot of hours spent trying to define fairly guidelines for our district. Every district, I think, goes through that process. Is that correct? It's not just us. Every district has guidelines. And I think when I came on this committee the first time, long ago, there were not real guidelines. Everything was kind of left up to, well, what do you think about this? And, well, Joe did this down the street, so now what are we going to do? And I remember back then that was uncomfortable for all of us because there's not very much consistency, and it bothered me. Now, whether everything's exactly in place for the next 10 years, probably not, but that's one of our jobs, is to keep ourselves current. But this was a recently discussed and reviewed issue. This is not back in 10, 15 years ago. And I think for all of the things that everyone that's spoken here, I agree with all of that. We do have a district that's an entertainment district that really, the knowledge that we have and the knowledge that people have of what's ongoing in Bricktown is widely dispersed. And if you come down on weekends, you'll see that that is the case. There's tons of people there. I think it's just a matter of how is our growth going to be, and I also, as Richard, aspire for a place that people can not only play, but they can work and live. And so I'm always mindful of the commitment to make sure that that happens. So it would be, after this lengthy thing, I just want to be sure that you understand, we all understand that we're not picking specifically on this type of signage. It's very difficult to get a sign. If any of you have ever done that, you know the process, and it isn't always approved. There's lighting restrictions, guidelines. It's difficult. So just another part of this discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks, Avis. I think those of us who haven't been on this committee as long as others, and we're kind of the beneficiary of a lot of this previous debate and the guidelines, which are very thoughtful. So, I think we have to take into account that this has been gone over, and there are reasons why those guidelines are there. As a designer, I'm pragmatic, if not, that's kind of my standard is, when you place things in the landscape, they need to have a reason, they need to have a function. They're not just there for just to be there. So when I look at this case, and I think about signage, it has to serve a utility function. Otherwise, it doesn't need to be there. In this case, it could cover the building. That's maybe not that attractive. Oklahoma City has a very long-standing history of painted signs on buildings up high, even when we're more pedestrian than we are today. So that is out there. I think where this in particular, I have to think about the pragmatic side of it, is that if the parking garage is doing good business and they don't have an issue of getting people into that garage, then the utility of the sign is not there, right? If there's signage at street level and those businesses are properly represented, the utility of the signage is not there. And then lastly, if the other purpose of this sign is to have events or festivals that are going on in Bricktown be advertised, I would assume that if that utility is needed, that these seats would be filled with people that promote those events, and they would be here telling us, we really need this to drive people into Bricktown. But I don't see those people here. I don't see anybody really making that case. So for all those reasons, I'm inclined to follow staff's recommendation and not recommend this move on with our approval.
Maybe make a motion to vote on this? Against?
You
I'm gonna
make
motion to
a
vote against this.
recommendation.
Yes, make a recommendation to vote.
Or just make the recommendation of either of approval or a denial.
Denial.
To the.
Yes.
Okay, so let me get back to the agenda here. Yes. So for item B, number 1 would be to provide a recommendation of denial to the Planning Commission on the basis that the project does not meet the regulations and guidelines of the Bricktown Core Development District zoning ordinance and signed ordinance as referenced in Section D of the staff report. Do we have a motion to recommend denial?
Yeah, can I make one more sort of comment / question really directed towards staff? Not a comment. This is a question. I'm done talking. I'm done espousing views. Can you just give me feedback on? I see these two recommendations that you have sort of suggested. Is there any precedent, or would it make sense to add in any additional recommendation that is more of either a resolution from this body or a statement of concern in regards to these sort of type of proposals? And maybe it's too strong of a statement. I guess so. I kind of asked this of Michael earlier, but is there anything else? If someone was to recommend it and suggest that the committee vote on it, that could make a statement specifically to the Planning Commission and City Council, because I think those are the next steps for this process in regards to this discussion that's taking place.
My only concern, piggybacking off of that, was that if we give a recommendation, it almost indicates that we believe they're not going to listen to us and they're going to vote for it. And so we basically, the denial was
I want to give, so I just like to actually give some color to that, I mean, for similar concerns. I'm just not sure.
Yeah,
if
that's what we were
appropriate.
attempting to do with the second recommendation, but I'm hearing from municipal councilor that you should just make one or the other.
I think it could potentially be ambiguous to Planning Commission and City Council what it is that the Bricktown Urban Design committee is intending, if there are both.
So let me ask a follow-up question along those lines.
Here,
Sorry, go ahead.
this might answer it.
Okay.
I know Board of Adjustment gets the meeting video. I don't know if Planning Commission gets it. Because, like, Board of Adjustment for sure hears the discussion. I don't know that Planning Commission does.
So,
staff can advocate with the Planning Commission staff that they do get it. We can specifically advocate for that.
okay, so that's close to the response I'm looking for. So we just passed a resolution for my colleague Omar Corey, who I miss already. So is there the opportunity to pass a resolution outside of this particular item, right, in regards to this item, or sort of consistent with this item, to sort of be able to make a statement about at least the conversation that's taking place? And not that I don't have faith in the staff to talk to the Planning Commission staff, but it just feels like it'd be helpful for some documentation, at least to go forward. Because those bodies do whatever they want. I just don't want there to be a sort of I'm not sure I'll be available for the Planning Commission meetings, for example, to speak as a citizen about my concerns. And we've had some deliberation. There's a lot of context here. So I just like for it to be forwarded really separate from the actual recommendation itself, but just as potentially as a statement from the body, assuming that somebody would propose that and that would have passed.
Since there isn't a resolution separately listed on the agenda, you can't pass that today. If you wanted to add specifics to your reasons for recommending denial, that is something that the commission could do.
Thank you very much.
Would a resolution be appropriate for another meeting if prior to we went through due process? How does that work?
If you wanted to pass a resolution in the future, I mean, it may, at that point, this may have already gone to Planning Commission by the time Bricktown will meet again.
I thought, Spendino, you were even talking in general, maybe moving forward. You're talking specifically about this time. We don't know. Okay. Final comment. I do think this was so nice to talk today, and I think from time to time, especially on short agendas, you know, we've had some 5-minute meetings. I think it's a good time for us to look forward and maybe have open discussion again.
I very much enjoyed the discussion as well. The minutes will get forwarded to Planning Commission. And so they'll see the denial, as Ms. McDevitt said. You can add reasons, but also there will be minutes, you know, kind of highlighting the discussion of what happened here.
Minutes don't highlight the discussion.
They don't? Oh.
They just
I think Michael's got the time.
They indicate who spoke and what the action was. And that's as per protocol from City Clerk's office.
But it won't be ambiguous. It'll say recommended for denial, and I can't even spin that, so.
So just so for my own edification, so what we're saying here is that since our minutes are pretty, you know, pretty stripped down, the Planning Commission does not receive a physical copy of the video, so they have to take it upon their own initiative to go to the OKC.gov agenda site and watch the video on their own. Okay.
Which they do.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that all of them do it all of the time, but they frequently mention in hearings that they've seen the video.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion. I move denial of the application, and I would like to sort of move denial of the application based on a lot of deliberative conversation and out of sort of concern for the impact of approving this item on the current ordinances, design regulation, et cetera, that exists for Bricktown in regards to EMD signs.
So just to clarify, so we are recommending E2?
Sorry, I am recommending, and I'm happy to clean up the language itself.
So we need to do either or.
So I'm not necessarily following the staff recommendations completely, because I do have some concerns about providing this sort of out, if you will. I mean, I think, and really going sort of back to the point, I actually have confidence that the staff can communicate some of these concerns and sort of what's been put on paper to the staff or the planning commission, for example. So my recommendation is really specifically in regards to denying this application with some commentary on the concerns for this application's impact on subverting or diverging from the current ordinances and sort of the broader design guidelines for the Bricktown Urban Design District, and the concern for the impact of approving this item may have in regards to the efficacy of those ordinances.
Okay.
So I'm happy for Laura to help clean up the actual language, but I think the intent is clear, and it's important for me just that the intent is clear for this body, because that recommendation might be a little further or than others are interested in or interested in approving, and I appreciate that as well. But that's what I would like to move.
So we need a motion to approve item 7B. I'm sorry.
I think that Sandino just provided his motion to recommend denial for the various bases that he listed.
Okay.
And we need a second now.
Thank you. We need a second. Anybody would like to second? Avis, okay. All in favor?
I
Aye.
will second it.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for your time today. I know it was a long conversation, so.
Sorry, point of order. Did Jonathan start a recommendation before?
I think I.
And was it seconded?
I think I was requesting a motion, but I didn't get all the way.
Okay, that's what
So it was
I
stopped.
thought. We thought we heard
It was
somebody
a really
second
poor
or
form.
half one.
So,
Okay.
So did it get approved, or?
Thank you. So item 7C, perfect timing because you need a new chair that can run this meeting a little bit more efficiently. So item C, we need to solicit nominations from the body to elect a new chair.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the term length of a chair
1 year.
Yeah, 1 year we elect every year.
every year? And there are times that we have a chair and a vice chair. There are other times, and so the vice chair automatically moves to the chair. There are other times, stay with me here, Jonathan. There are other times when there's a chair and a vice chair, and we just don't consider the vice chair moving up. We just have a totally new election. So I'm curious if that pendulum should swing both ways. In the olden days, back when there was covered wagons and I was on this, we always had a chair and a vice chair, and the vice chair was in training to step up. I'm not saying that it has to be that way, and I'm not sure Jonathan would be trainable in some ways. But it is just a question for clarification. Do we have a way that we would like to always do this and be serious about, if we are going to have a vice chair, to have them know when they're nominated that it is a longer commitment than just serving as a vice chair? Is there any discussion or thoughts on that?
Given the nature of historic preservation, I'm thinking this is a good idea to go back to covered wagon precedents.
I agree.
Jonathan? But now, having said that, I'm not sure, Jonathan, that was on the understanding when Jonathan took the vice chair.
Correct.
So we might just want to start fresh, or if you're, would love to have you, but I'm not trying to get you in trouble either.
You already did that. That has not been the precedence in the past. If we choose to make it this year, I will quickly get some private training from all those previous board members and fulfill the role to the best of my ability.
Good.
Well, I would second that.
All right, I need a...
Yeah, was
yes.
that a motion? Was there a motion?
Yeah, can I get a motion to
I would like, before you motion, to say that that is the expectation moving forward. For our...
Yeah, we have talked, staff has discussed that if we should embed that in the bylaws, that's how it works. So if the committee believes that to be a good practice, we can.
I would have fought a lot harder last year against acceptance.
Are you really okay with that?
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
I agree. Are you saying that since I was not a vice chair, that I'm the new president?
Actually, I think you have
Hence my
done a
poor
wonderful
training
job.
that I have.
A wonderful job.
Yeah. No, I'll say Jonathan will probably watch your videos, because I think you did a very good job.
Okay, thank you.
And I appreciate it, because I'm sitting here thinking, because I know eventually I'll probably be in that hot seat. I didn't think Jonathan was next, but I'll...
Is that an opening? Yeah, that's an opening.
No.
Okay, I need a nomination I need a motion to nominate Jonathan Dodson to be the next chair of the Bricktown Urban Design Committee.
So moved.
I need a second.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed?
Abstain.
This is kind of fun.
I motion that we nominate Kasia.
Oh, okay, fine.
All in favor of Kasia Egan becoming the elect vice chair of the Bricktown Urban Design Committee, aye?
Aye.
Aye. That's just fine.
All opposed, nay. The item passes. Congratulations. We look forward to being under your leadership. Item 8, we had a few administrative approvals. Were there any of these items that the committee wanted to discuss? If not, we will move on. Item B, on January 15th, the City Council did appoint Ophelia Kencio to the board, and also Richard McCown again to the board. Again, thank you all for your service. Item C, any comments from Planning Department staff?
Yes, new this year, if you've been on the committee before, Paula populated your calendars with the invitation to the meeting for all the meeting dates in 2019, and people have accepted those. Please note your acceptance is not the quorum call, so please, that's for you to hold the date and not book over it. But so when you get the agenda email, please also respond so she'll know you're coming.
Okay.
So I didn't even realize the calendar, was it for the whole year already set on a calendar, or you're doing it month? Oh, fantastic. Already there.
We started doing that for one of the other committees at their request, and we were like, everybody needs it.
I mean, I have to put it on there myself, so you did a step for me.
Okay. Item D, any comments from our committee members?
I do have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I would like to thank planning for what was obviously today. You had spent an inordinate amount of time trying to sort this out and to put down on paper the things that you felt like were a deviation from our guidelines. And because this is such a really, it's, I think, a tender subject for all of us to have to think about denial of a proposed item, it was so helpful to have some clarification on this in more detail than, well, it was just nice for you to do that. So thank you for planning. And again, I can't tell you how much I enjoyed our conversation today, and I hope that we are encouraged to do that more often. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that. It's appreciated to encourage conversation from both sides, because as a younger member, it takes a little while to get your voice to actually want to turn on your microphone and talk. And it isn't always to our best interest to have such more short meetings as a group, just because I'm still getting to know the rest of my members up here. And I think it's an opportunity, just if we're all on board, it just helps give more background to the district we're trying to serve, I think. And I hope that can help in Ophelia's case to give her more of an opportunity to gain a voice a little bit sooner, I think. So.
And I just want to say thank you all for having me here and for giving me the opportunity to serve with you all. I'm very passionate about this district, so I hope to look forward to this. So thank you.
All right, I'm going to try and talk fast. So I had two comments. One is a little bit in relation to that, and I just feel like it's important to say it. Both my comments are in relation to the fact that we seem to be meeting a lot less frequently. In my time being on this committee, I mean, there were times we met monthly for sure, and I mean, like, we probably met 9 times in a year, for example. I think last year we might have met maybe 4 times or something like that. So in light of that, I do think there's one statement that I kind of wanted to make, not related to the item that we considered today, but to just what I've experienced, and this is not just my sort of opinions, even what I experienced, even with some of the previous long-served members of this committee, is really appreciating the value of Bricktown. I think is the largest sales tax generator in the city of Oklahoma City. So there are a lot of conversations about the proposed downturn or whatever, and it's an evolution really. And so a few years ago, we had the opportunity to review a lot of projects that are now either out of the ground, completed, et cetera. Some maybe adding more value to the district than others and that kind of thing. So I'm not trying to make that commentary. But it was really just that when we were meeting more frequently and it was more obvious, there was a lot more conversation about these projects, we really were able to have, I feel like, a conversation. It wasn't my statements, a conversation about a lot of folks on this committee about how could we push sort of the envelope a little bit for Bricktown being the city's premier entertainment district and also being this historic sort of treasure, so not fake history, but just really evolved history. I mean, it's a mishmash, right? And I would hate to lose that in part because we don't see as much of that activity coming, and then we do have several newer members. But it was really constructive, I feel like, to be able to have that conversation. I mean, in regards to EMDs, we did that actually and said there are very cool and interesting applications that could apply to Bricktown for how to use this technology. We don't necessarily want billboards, and not like this body don't, but is it a good design sort of idea or concept to put billboards up in a historic entertainment district? So we would have those conversations a little bit more clearly. And it happened in a few other areas. We talked about the water coolers, for example, and whether it was possible to encourage building owners, again, because they get to choose what they do, but to put more water towers up, because historically that was something that happened, and it could really differentiate our historic district from other places. So Richard actually talked about his Times Square thing, and I know that was not a joke. I mean, he was seriously saying from a use case standpoint, how would something like that impact Bricktown as a district, as a draw, and create an opportunity? So I actually think I'm kind of building on that, and I do think it's helpful. And I also just would want to say to some of y'all who are newer, where we're not maybe meeting as frequently and having these conversations around projects as much, that this committee has, I feel like in the last 6 years or so, created constructive dialogue, I think, to help revitalize the district. I think about a lot of the development that happened on Main Street and the conversations about Tapstone and things like that, how those would come together. I mean, really to help give guidance to steel yards and those kind of conversations about how we can bring that into the aesthetic. I just think it's important to make that point, in part because we don't see as many projects coming up, and I think that's okay. It's a cycle. It is what it is. The other piece is just a little bit of a comment for the staff, because we don't meet as frequently. I'm not sure if this is practical or not, but it would be helpful for someone like me if the administrative approvals, which we tend to see on the agendas when they go out, could maybe be sent as a bunch or something of that nature. And when we get those meeting cancellations, and here's the deal, it might actually already be happening, and I just don't know about it. And that's okay as well. I just need to pay more attention. So,
yeah, we send out the public notices for the AAs every Monday. We can look at is one of those an email list? Okay, we post it on the website. So we will look at how we can send you an alert or something to check it on the website.
And it's a comment, not even necessarily a request. So I trust you. I mean, if it's just, hey, go look at the website.
Yeah, I do think about that too, because we run this report for the agenda, and I'm like, wow, that's like 4 months worth of
Yeah.
of approvals.
And that's what spurred the comment, but I'll trust you guys to do what you will with that. Thank you.
All right. Item number E, our next meeting date. Please tell me we have a super long agenda.
I know. I'm sorry. Yeah, we don't have any cases. We won't. We usually wait a week or two to cancel it just in case something last minute, and like if the big one comes in, you guys want to hear it, right? So
He's already getting off easy. That's not good. All right. With that, we will adjourn at 10:20 a.m. Thank you.